Get up, get focused, and get into your passion on a foggy Saturday morning. We've been talking about hearing what God's trying to say to you. And I told you that the first thing that has to happen is you got to recognize that God is talking to you. You got to be receptive and listen, calm the distractions in your mind. Once you recognize it and you understand what He's trying to say to you, you got to lock it in. You lock it in to your memory by focusing on it, using those neural pathways that we talked about yesterday to lock that in. And then the last step, after you recognize and then lock it in, you got to live it out. See, there's a lot of times you might recognize God's trying to tell you something, and you might even go to the extent to lock it in to the neural pathways in your brain. And you might always have that little tidbit that's locked in and you remember. But if you don't live it out, it does you no good. I'm going to give you a real life example in my life. When I was younger, I was plagued with a bad temper, a really bad temper. It seemed like I always was losing my temper, always getting mad, always over agitated when something went wrong or somebody was against me. And a lot of times this would happen in meetings, and I struggled with that. And so I knew for years God was speaking to me about controlling that aspect of my brain, controlling that temper. And He brought to me a scripture, James 1:19. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. And so when I recognized the fact that He was talking to me through that scripture, I locked that in. And the way I did it, and it's different for everyone, but I like numbers, I like visuals, and so I just created the little tagline, J119, and I wrote it down on pieces of paper, and I locked it in, I focused on it, and locked it in. So every time I would see written down J119, which to me meant James 1:19, I would remember. My brain would automatically go, be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. And that was locked in, tagged in my brain. Every time I would see it, that's what would come up. So then, I still struggled trying to really put it to work in my life. But the way I lived it out was every time I would go into a meeting or some sort of situation where I might be in danger of losing my temper, on the top of a piece of paper, whether it was an agenda or notes or whatever, I would just write J119. Simple. And then anytime I felt myself losing my cool or starting to go in that direction, I took my pen and I circled J119. And it immediately brought to mind, be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. And I have been able to, with work and setbacks, control my temper simply by recognizing what God was saying, realizing what works best for me to lock it in, and then devising a technique that worked for me to live it out. And that's the key. And I use that technique in multiple areas in my life. The technique may be a little bit different for you, But whatever works for you, recognize what God's saying. Lock it in. Live it out. Moyo, everywhere we go.